Hi there, welcome to the Barbara Young channel. Now today I'm going to start a new project. Well, actually I'm not. It's a project I've already started, but I have only done a mock-up. Project was for this top, the Kwik Sew 4158. That one. Now, as I say, I've already started doing this because I already did a mock-up. This one. Now this mock-up, it went quite well. I did a couple of adjustments to this mock-up that I felt needed, mainly on this dart here, and maybe a little bit of adjustment on that piece. Other than that, not really much else. I need to lengthen the sleeve, but I can do that. I've already adjusted the pattern for that, so I've got all my pattern pieces and everything ready. It was just a case of I didn't have material to make it with, and I haven't really decided what I was going to make it from. Well, I have now, so I've gone and got some material so I can actually get on and make this as a proper top rather than just this mock-up. And the materials that I've got are blue and pink. Now, traditionally, you might hear people say that blue is for boys and pink is for girls. Well, I say, nah, let's put them together and have them in one garment. Why not? They do go together quite well, so why not? So I'm going to make this top with pink and blue in one. I think it'll come together quite nicely. Now, the next consideration when doing this is I've got two contrasting colours, blue and pink. Now, what colour thread shall I use? Shall I use blue thread or shall I use pink thread? Now, some blue thread. Now, this blue goes quite well with this blue material, but it is a little bit darker. And it sort of goes quite well with the pink, contrasts well with it. The pink thread, of which goes very well with that pink, and actually contrasts really well with the blue. So I think actually the pink thread will suit better with this blue and pink mix than the blue thread. So that's what I'm going to go with, the pink thread. And I think that'll work just fine. Now, my two pieces of material, I think, did I order 2 or 3? I think I had 3 meters of each, so I've got way more than I should have to be concerned about. It's a poly cotton, sort of bedsheet type thing, only it's new, it's never been used, and it has been pre-washed. I pre-washed this. You can see it's got a bit frayed on the edge, because you should always pre-wash all your materials, and actually they've gone quite well, so they look quite nice. And there's a certain amount of, I'd say they're totally see-through, but they are slightly, but that's not a problem as far as I'm concerned. It's for quite a light summer top, as far as I'm concerned, because that's, you know, what it can be worn as, because you can have it with or without sleeves. I'm making the version with the sleeve because I want to. Now, I've gone with, where are my notes? Lost my notes. Tell me what size I'm going with. I think I'm going with the medium, if I remember rightly, of which, according to the sizes on this, medium bust is 37 to 38.5 inches, or 94 to 98 centimetres. Waist, which is really not that relevant because it's quite a loose fitting garment, is 27.5 to 29 inches, or 70 to 74 centimetres. Hips, again, not all that relevant, it's quite flared, it's quite loose fitting, is 38.5 inches to 40 inches, or 98 to 102 centimetres. And the back waist length for the medium is 16.5 inches, or 42 centimetres. And when I looked at this, it tells me that I'm going to need about, well, it's saying top A and B 1.1 meters, but with the contrast being 0.8 of a meter and contrast B 1.3, so we are talking just over 2 meters. So having 3 meters of each is more than enough to be able to do this top. Hopefully it'll come out nicely. Now the other thing with this is obviously it's contrast, so I've been looking at how I can contrast it, what parts I'm going to contrast with, and that brings me to the decision of which pieces I'm going to have what colour. So I'm doing it with, now despite the colours of the mock-up, that was just so I could understand how it went together and how the fact you got contrasting panels, I'm going with the right upper front, right, that's going to be blue, this section, this is going to be pink, which means this is going to be blue, and this bit down here is going to be pink. And then when I go to the back, I'm going to be left upper back, which is that one there, because that's back to front, I've turned it, it's going to be blue, and that'll be pink, this will be pink, and that'll be blue. And then I've got the decision of, do I do contrasting sleeves, so like left sleeve blue, right sleeve pink, or do I have them both blue, or do I have them both pink? Don't know, not really decided yet. The neck banding piece I'm going to have as pink to contrast. So at the moment that's my considerations. So really I'm all ready to go. All I've got to do now is get my pattern marked up on material and get it cut out. Well, that's after I've ironed it. Like I say, I have pre-washed it, just needs an iron, and then ready to get on with it. And hopefully it comes together quite quickly. Well, I've managed to get all my pieces cut out. I've got them all stacked up here. The pink and the blue, I've got them sort of separated out, but I have got my list so I know which ones, where is it? I know which ones are for what, supposedly. Hopefully it'll come together. So I suppose the first thing I've got to do actually with these is the 2 darts, the darts on the front pieces. So that'll be the first step. Let's get them put in and sorted, and then I can move on to the next one. So I've got the darts done. Got the dart there, that's the left piece and the right. Now next point is to make the front pieces, which are obviously left and right, but they're in 2 panels because you've got the top and the bottom bit. So with this one, which is this side, I've now got to add the bottom bit to it. Now this might seem straightforward, but actually it's not. The instructions show it as just one straight simple stitch up, and it is a bit of a stitch up, believe me, because as you can see the bottom section here is actually a straight edge, whereas the piece it has to attach to, this piece, that's a curved edge, so it doesn't line up the way, that's the centre front, doesn't line up the way you expect it's going to. The issue being is that to get that flare out on that bottom piece, you've got to have that curve apparently, that's the way it looks like. But it means that instead of having 2 like right facing pieces you put together so along the straight edge and then fold them out, you don't have that. You have this curvature that you've got to take account of. The other problem with that is normally you'd get the 2 flat edges and you'd line them up, but because it doesn't sit like that, you can't line up those 2 pieces. You're lining up on a different axis or a different angle to make that curved piece sit in against that flat edge. So it's a little bit more than just slap them together, stitch it up and be done. No, this is a little tricky. From doing the mock-up, I found that I had to do that, well, on one piece I did it 3 times before I actually got it right. So I have made notes on the actual instructions, actually wrote down on here, so I can try and line it up a bit better before I actually stitch it. So that's the next tricky task, stitching it on. But first, I'm going to pin it up and hopefully get it in the right place before I get anywhere near the machine. Now this is where it's been getting a little bit tricky for me with these fronts. Because we've got this curvature on the bottom piece and a straight edge on this top piece, then actually you have to, you know, ease in that curvature against that straight edge. But also not quite so simple as that, because of the seam allowance, which is 15mm, 1.5 centimetres, or whatever in intage. Because I don't work in the imperial, I generally work in metric, so I just do the metric, which is 15mm. So there I've got 15mm up to this pin. So the point where this lower piece intersects with the upper piece needs to be at that point, even though I've got here, can't really see it, a part of it that's sort of overhanging. You'd think that that would match up evenly against the bottom edge, but it doesn't. Same goes on here. You know, it doesn't quite line up right, because you need to make sure that the lining up is on where the seam line would be, because if you don't, then when this piece comes down, this edge will not line up and it'll be off. It'll either sit over or too far back. So lining this up properly is a bit of a task to make sure that when this is sewn up, you get that nice straight edge, because this is going to be your centre seam on the centre front, so that needs to all be in line. And I found, to my annoyance, that it takes quite a bit of work to make sure that that seam is, that this piece is sat correctly on the upper piece, so you get that seam in the right place. Same on the other side as well, on the left and right. You've got to work both of them in the same way to make sure that is in the right place. So let's get it sewn up. Well, I managed to get the front pieces now sewn together. I'm giving them a bit of a press to press the seam. Now it says to press the seam upwards, so that's the left side, and this is the right side. So is that right? Yep. There we go. Left and right. So they're now seams done, pressed and done. And next point is, it says to finish these seams off I should overcast or serge them, you know, with your overlocker. Don't have one of them. So as this is quite a thin, light material, I'm just going to use some pinking shears. That'll do, I think. Be enough for it. Pinking shears will then hold out and stop it from going anywhere. So yeah, that's what I'll do. Pink my edges and be done with it. But that's the front two panels sorted. So the next step is the backs. Now, putting the backs together is basically like the fronts, only with the backs you've got two pieces that are the same. The left back and the right back are just a mirror image of each other, only I've changed the colours round so that one side has blue at the top and then the pink on the bottom, and the other side has the pink at the top and the blue on the bottom. Again, you have this thing with the hem where you obviously have to match it up properly so that when you fold it down you get that straight edge rather than it being, you know, off a bit zigzaggy sort of thing. So that's the only thing to watch out with that. And again, it's a curved edge against a straight edge, so exactly the same complication as the fronts. So having done the fronts, the backs should be fairly simple, especially as they're just mirror images of each other. So just get those two sewn up and then I'll have the left and right back sorted. Well, I've now got my front and back, and this is the left, I think. Anyway, the next stage is to actually put the front and back pieces together. not the left and right. We're not making the left and right making a front and back. We're going to be putting it together, so we end up with a left piece and a front piece. Sorry, left piece and a right piece. Yeah, I've no idea what I'm talking about. I'm going to end up with a left piece, front and back together. So what's going to happen is the side seams are going to go together for the whichever side this is. I think this is the left side, and then I'll do the right side. So I'll end up with a left and a right. Left, right, yeah, that's it. And there's a reason for that, and that'll be in the next step. So first of all, let's get these two bits sewn up. I've now got my left and right pieces put together, and don't be fooled, this isn't a neckline, this is actually the underarm. That is the shoulder, and that is the bit that goes around the back there. So I've got a left piece and a right piece. Now the next step in constructing this garment is to actually do the hems. You've got two hems on either side, and it seems really out of order. Normally you do your hems at the end. You do the whole hem for the whole garment. Not on this pattern. On this one you now have to do the hemming, which actually doesn't run just on the bottom here. It comes up because you've got this V, where is it? You've got this V section there on the garment. It means that you have to hem this bottom edge and that V section on the front. There's a front and a back V section before you put the two sides together, because if you don't, it will become very difficult to make that hem work. And believe me, I've tried, so I know that if you don't do it at this point, even though it seems very out of sequence, you'll struggle to get and do it later on. So the construction process, the steps taken, does seem very much out of order, but I suppose it works because this is a bit of an odd shaped garment. You've got odd shaped pieces coming together to form a garment in an irregular manner, so it doesn't go together in the same steps that you normally do. So my next step, and now that I've got a left and right piece, is to do the hems, which is a bit quirky. So on we go. Well, I've got the seams done now, so, or should I say the hems. So I've hemmed both pieces. These have both been done. So you've got this front edge piece that's there, and across the bottom, and then again on this edge, because you've got that little V shape that's within on the front at the bottom. So that's the right side, and they've got the left side. So next step is to actually sew up the back seam, not any other seams, just the back seam. I think it's the back seam, and then the shoulders, which sounds a bit odd because the front's going to be left open. Now when I did the mock-up for this, there is a reason for that. So I suppose I best get on and get that bit done, get the back seam done, the shoulders, and then the front seam isn't done because you need to put in that like the neckband piece. But the way it goes in means you need to leave the front seam open. So get that done and see where we go. Well, I finally got to the stage of sewing up the back and the shoulders, and I've got the hem done, and well, it is coming together. So I've been able to get to the point where I can actually push it on me and see how it's going. Now the front eventually will be stitched up like so, and we're starting to get to see the way that this is sitting. I mean, the hem's done, and you know, looking quite nice really. And even though I've got this neckband to do, which is the next thing I'm going to do, and I've got the arm to put on last, I can see that the way that this is sitting is just right. I mean, there's a dart here, you know, on the side, and when I'd originally done the mock-up for this, I decided to move this dart and change it so the dart is a little shorter. And did I move it down? I can't remember if I moved it down or up, but I moved it, and now actually that dart is sitting in just the right place for me. It seems really comfortable with where it is. So yeah, that's coming together really quite nicely, hem done, and it's the back view, and it yeah, sitting quite nicely, I think. So next, neckband, which, if I remember rightly, when I did the mock-up, was a little bit tricky. So I've got to work out exactly how these pieces have got to go on. I've got to do some interfacing on them as well. So I've got to get that cut out. So probably quite a little bit of time is going to be spent on doing the neckband, even though it's not a big part of it. It's just a little bit fiddly. So I need to pay attention to what I'm doing with that, and I'm going to put that on, but I'll do that next. Now see, the construction is that I will do this neckband, then I think I do the front seam, and then I put the arms on. Now I might change that construction method. I might actually put the neckband on, put the sleeves on, get them done, and then last but not least get the front sewn up. Now before I tried it on, I did have an idea about this front seam. Now it might be wrong of me to do, but I'm thinking, do I want it stitched up, or do I want it to be like a button up, so I could unbutton this and it's more of a button up top? But that would mean having to design basically like a button placket or something to put in there that I would need to make this reinforced enough to be able to have buttons. So I don't know, I mean, I'm going to leave this opening, this front seam, until the very last, so that I can actually decide on how I'm going to put this together, whether I'm just going to sew it up as it is, or whether I'm going to think about putting buttons in, which is quite a bit of work, I think, probably going to be to get that done. But it'll be the last thing I do, so really I need to get on with what I've got now, neckband, sleeves, and then look at basically finishing it off by doing this front seam as it should be, or amended with buttons. Well, I've now got the waistband, sorry, not waistband, the neckband put together. Now, I've not done this the way that it tells me on the instructions. What I've actually done is formed the whole of the neckband together. Now, it starts off by saying you'd have to take the pieces, there's 3 pieces, 2 longer pieces like this, and the middle section, right, and you have to stitch them together. And then you've got that like a facing piece, the piece that's got the facing on, and you do the same. So you end up with two long strips that are like that, but they're not joined together, because the way it says to do this is to take the first piece, this one, and attach it onto the neck and put it round and then stitch it, and then it says to then attach the facing piece to this first neckband that's already attached to the garment, then to do your underpinning, and then do your whatever else you've got to do, and then turn it round. But when I did the mock-up, I found that a bit tiresome, I suppose is the word, because obviously you've got the whole of the garment as you're trying to work with this. So I actually found that the better way to do this was to actually make the whole of the neckband with the 2 pieces together. So I've stitched them together, right sides together, stitched them, then turned the trimmed the seam allowance, ironed it down, then done what is my understitching, because that'll be on the inside. So I've done that understitching, then I've done the edging. You know, if you've got an overlocker, that'd probably work. Could have turned it in and hemmed it up sort of as a sort of hem, but that's just the way I've done it because it'll be on the inside. So that's my whole of my neckband done as one piece, so I won't have to fiddle around with it too much. So that should, I'm hoping, make it easier. So now all I've got to do now is take this piece and fit it onto the neck and stitch that, and then I can, it's just a case of turning it up, turning it over and tacking down the facing piece on the inside, which hopefully all in all is actually quicker than doing each part of this construction separately as it shows in the instructions. So this is still going to be a bit fiddly, so I better get on with it. Now I've got the neckband on. This, you can see this piece here goes all the way around, just gives it a nice edging to the actual neckline. Yeah, it's come out quite well despite the hassle of it. There's the hazard of causing controversy. I'm going to say that it's not quite right, and it's not necessarily the way that I've done it, because when I did it on the mock-up, that had the same issue. The back piece here, where it comes across the back, you have to sort of not gather it in, but you do have to ease it in, and there's a bit too much easing going on for my liking. It feels like that piece isn't the right size. Get this? Basically, this piece here, this piece forms that centre. Now it's cut on the fold, so you end up with, you know, double length, but to me it feels like there's too much material. Like this is basically too long. There's just too much material in there, so you've got to ease quite a lot of material in around this curvature. Now I know there's going to be some easing going on because you're talking about a curvature, but there is so much there, you end up with this slight crinkling up of material, which doesn't look great, and it makes it really hard work to get it on. So I can get that. Can you see that sort of crinkling up? To me, it just shouldn't be there like that. It shouldn't be that difficult to have to ease that curvature in, and yet it is. So there's, to me, I think that's too big. Possibly by about a cent across the whole on this piece, across the whole thing. If when you open it out, it's probably between 1 to 2 centimeters too long, I think. So I'm going to experiment when I make this top again. I'm going to make this top again. I will do it another time, but without sleeves, because I want to make a sleeveless version, possibly with something a little bit more heavyweight in material. But I'm going to shorten this from there by about 1 centimetre, so I get about 2 centimetres shorter on this centrepiece that sits in here on the back, and just see if it makes it easier to ease in. But as this one stands, generally it seems to have gone quite well. All I've got to do now actually is just ditch stitch this facing piece so it doesn't come up and move about, and then supposedly I should do the centre seam, but I'm actually going to do the sleeves first and put them in, and then take it from there really, because I haven't really decided how I'm doing that centre seam. I'm contemplating changing it, as I've already mentioned. So yeah, let's get this ditch stitch done and then onto the sleeves, and nearly there almost, just the front to sort out then. Well, got the waistband, neckband finished off now, done the ditch stitch in there on that to keep it in place, and I've also got the sleeves done. So which way round was it? Like that, I think. So they're stitched up, even done the hem on the bottom, on the cuff part, it's just hemmed up, so they just need to be put in. So 2 sleeves in, and front front seam, and then that is basically done. So here's my finished top. Well, I say finished, I've actually got this one seam left to do. It's the front seam. Now I supposedly should have done the front seam before I put the arms on, but I decided not to. I decided to put the arms on and then make this one seam here the last thing to do. Now I have been contemplating doing something different to what the actual instructions say. Now my consideration is actually to put buttons down the front here, but to do that means I've got to do some thinking about how it's going to go together, because I still want it to come together properly so it joins up the way it should do and has the V correctly as it comes on the neckline. But that means what I'm going to have to do is effectively make a facing piece on this side and this side, because obviously it needs a lot more strength in there, but then also possibly put a little, I know, is it like a button placket or whatever it's called, that goes in here that actually has the buttons on it, that'll sit next to it, so when I button it up it'll still form the right shape, but this side won't overlap in a way that is not expected, so it still gives the right look, but there is a button placket behind it with the buttons, so the buttons will set off to one side. I could make it so that I put buttons on this side that are false ones just to give an even look, but don't necessarily need to do that, but it will have buttons over on one side, and that's what I'm going to try and do now that the rest of it is basically on. The sleeves, as you can see, the sleeve length is just right. I love that sleeve length, perfect on me. So everything is basically done, just got to do the front fastening, which is now going to be a fastening with buttons. Now this is taking me way outside my comfort zone, because this is something I'm going to have to make up that isn't in the instructions at all. Now so far my skills that I've got, that I've learned, I think have given me enough knowledge to be able to attempt this. I'm not saying it's going to come out great, might not even work at all, but I'm going to give it a go and see if I can get buttons on the front of this top. I finally got this top together. The last thing I had to do really was to do the front seam, of which I completely changed what I was going to be doing, because on the pattern it says you just sew up the front seam and there you go. Now when I'd cut this out, I had cut it a little bit on the close side without too much ease, which is a little bit different from the mock-up that I'd done, because this one I can put on off over my head, but this one, the actual finished garment as it were, I decided to make it a little bit more closer, and I did realise that as I got near to the end that when I'd sewn this up I wouldn't have enough room to get it on and off over my head, so I came up with the idea of putting buttons on it, which seems to have worked quite well. I quite like that. Yeah, there we go, finished garment with the pink and blue panels on either side, sleeves really about the right length for me. I've lengthened them out and I quite like that length, so yeah, neckbands come out alright. There we go, all done, finally. So that's my Kwik Sew 4158 top, all done and made, and I don't know, looking quite good. Quite enjoyed making that that top. There was a few things that did challenge me on that. I mean, I had done the mock-up, and when doing the mock-up what I found was, one, you have to be careful of the fact that because it's cut on the bias it's likely to stretch out a bit. Two, this neckline isn't quite as simple as it originally or first looks like when you're going to put it in. It takes a little bit more work. I think that this centerpiece on the neckband is actually a little too wide on the pattern, so I might have to adjust that and see how it goes next time I make it. Sleeves were way too short for me, so I did extend them. It does show in the picture on the front of the pattern that the sleeves are quite short, so if you want longer sleeves you will need to lengthen them. And the size that I did originally on the mock-up, it's designed to go over your head because it's sewn up at front and the back, and then when I did my actual piece, I did it, but I took it in a little. I suppose I scaled it down a bit. I used the medium size, but cut it on the lean side, as it were. So I did notice that once I was making this, it was a little trim, as it were, to my fitting. It fitted quite closely. So as I was nearly done, and all I really had left to do was to put the sleeves on and sew up the front, I decided I was going to put buttons on the front. Of course, that's a whole other world of issues, because having buttons on the front, because it wasn't designed that way, I then got to look at creating a facing piece for where the buttons were going to go on both of the side fronts, on the left and the right side, and then also that facing piece on the left side also got to have the button placket, as it's called, to go on there. So I got somewhere to put my buttons, so that when these meet up in the middle, they do actually meet up in the middle the way that the pattern would have expected it to look, but with buttons in there. So let me do the buttons up. So that was a bit of a challenge, really, because I mean, I hadn't designed it, that it is not designed that way. The pattern certainly doesn't show that. So it did draw on a lot of the skills that I've learned so far to be able to put that in there and to make it work. I mean, I think I'm getting much better at doing buttonholes and spacing for buttons and that, and getting used to putting buttons on there, but I've never had to make a little sort of additional placket piece to actually mount those buttons, as it were, to put them in somewhere. Facing pieces, getting better at. Now with these two facing pieces, they do sort of sit a bit awkward, because when you're doing facing pieces, it seems to be that normally you work them into the piece as you're doing it, you know, you don't put them in at the end. So the bottom piece, the bottom part of it, I shaped to the shape of the material. This piece, it goes along this angled edge, but really I probably should have had it cut off at the square there on where the bottom of this, it's the very bottom there where the bottom button is. So yeah, a couple of considerations there, but it did work. It's worked fine. So when I make this again, and I do intend to make it again, I am going to do it without sleeves, to a version that's going to be, well, not so lightweight, because actually this is a polycotton, and I was thinking of using a very slightly heavier 100% cotton material, somewhat with a pattern on it, and do that without the sleeves, but again with the button up on the front. But I will obviously insert the facing pieces and that at a more appropriate point rather than a lathe thing at the end. But yeah, it's come off quite well. I really do quite like that. It's a bit of odd shaping, and it was enjoyable to do, and certainly a challenge for me, even though it is just a quick sew and it's meant to be a basic pattern. Yeah, there was a certain amount of challenge in that, and I enjoyed doing it. I learned something from it. I learned some new skills, I think, from doing that, and I learnt that I've got to be a little more considerate about what I'm doing before I actually get into doing it, especially with stuff that's cut on the bias. That's a whole new ball game, with stuff that stretches all over the place when you're not expecting it to. But there you go, lovely experience. I enjoyed doing it, so I do look forward to doing this one again, possibly maybe in the middle of the summer, when I've got some nice material I think might work with it. So yeah, Kwik Sew 4158. Definitely an enjoyable make, and I'll be looking forward to doing it again. Thank you for joining me on my video. I look forward to seeing you on my next video. Bye. Bye.